The morning light has barely touched the rooftops of Rome. It is early, the first hour by the Roman reckoning, what we would call somewhere around 7 in the morning, and the city is already in motion. The bakers have been working since before dawn. The smell of bread smoke drifts from the shop fronts cut into the ground floors of the apartment buildings that press against the narrow streets. The cart drivers, who have been moving goods through the city all night, are beginning to pull back as the daytime ban on wheeled vehicles comes into effect. Somewhere near the Forum, a schoolmaster is already shouting. Rome in the morning sounds like hammers and arguments and the rumble of the last carts heading out. Inside the Domus Publica, the official residence of the Pontifex Maximus, the house Caesar has called home for over 20 years, a man stands in the atrium. He is not Caesar. His name is Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus, and he has come early. He has come on purpose. Decimus is one of Caesar's oldest generals. He commanded fleets in the civil wars against Pompey. He governed provinces. He dined with Caesar the night before at the house of Lepidus. And he smiled, and he poured wine, and he listened to Caesar talk about the best kind of death. Caesar named him in his will. Caesar selected him for the consulship 2 years from now. Of all the men Caesar trusts in the world, Decimus is among the innermost circle. Perhaps the innermost of all, and Decimus is going to kill him today. But first, he has a problem. Caesar is refusing to leave the house. His wife Calpurnia is in the atrium too. She has been awake since before dawn, shaking, not quite steady on her feet. She dreamed his body in her arms, his blood covering her hands, and when she woke the windows of the room were open, and the air was cold and strange. She has been begging him for hours. The priests have come and gone, and every sacrifice they have attempted has come back wrong. The liver of the first animal was missing entirely. The second was malformed. When the third sacrifice failed as well, even Caesar, who does not believe in omens, who disbanded his bodyguard because he refuses to live in fear, even Caesar started to hesitate. He sent word to Mark Antony, "Go to the theater of Pompey. Tell the senators the session is postponed on account of inauspicious omens. The sitting is dissolved. This is the moment Decimus is here to fix." He speaks carefully. He tells Caesar that the Senate has been waiting since early morning. He says, "What will people think when it gets out that the dictator of Rome stayed home because of a woman's dream?" He says, "You yourself summoned these men." He says, according to Nicolaus of Damascus, who gathered testimony from people close to the events, he says it almost directly. "What is this, Caesar? Are you a man to pay attention to a woman's dreams and the idle gossip of stupid men, and to insult the Senate by not going out, when they have honored you and have been specially summoned by you?" He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. He knows Caesar well enough to know exactly where to press. And there is one more thing he mentions, one more piece of information he holds out like a piece of bait, very deliberately. The Senate today may be planning to offer Caesar a crown, not the title of Rex, not openly, not yet, but a formal expansion of his authority into the eastern provinces, something that has been in discussion, something Caesar has wanted. If Caesar stays home, Decimus suggests, the Senate might withdraw the offer. Caesar hesitates. He looks at Calpurnia. He looks at Decimus, then he calls for his toga. Calpurnia says nothing. She has already said everything she knows how to say. Caesar is 55 years old. He has crossed the Rubicon. He has conquered Gaul. He has defeated Pompey, Cato, and every general Rome has sent against him. He has survived pirates, wars, and political exile. He has never once lived in fear of other men, and he does not intend to start now. He is 4 days away from leaving Rome to campaign against the Parthians, the greatest military project of his life, the campaign that will avenge the death of Crassus and extend the Roman world to its farthest edge. There is no time for this. He wraps the toga around his body and steps toward the door. To understand how we arrived here, to understand this man and this woman, and the man who came to the house on purpose, we need to go back 24 hours to a dinner table and a conversation about death, and 3 men who each believe something entirely different about what comes next. Part 1. The Last Supper at Lepidus's house. Evening of March 14, 44 BC, the 9th hour, the point when the city's business winds down, when the baths fill with men washing off the dust of the day, when the shadows start to lengthen across the forum, and the smell of oil lamps begins to drift through open windows. It is the hour when the wealthy of Rome eat their evening meal. Marcus Aemilius Lepidus is hosting tonight. His house is on the Palatine Hill, the most fashionable address in all of Rome, where the oldest and richest families have built their homes above the noise and smell of the city below. The Palatine sits at the heart of Rome's mythology and its architecture both. This is where Romulus is said to have built the first hut. This is where the great houses look down over the Forum, over the temples, over the whole apparatus of the Republic that is, in the spring of 44 BC, ceasing to function as a republic in any meaningful sense. The rooms are painted in deep reds and ochres, the floors are marble, the triclinium, the formal dining room, holds 3 wide couches arranged in a U shape around a low central table. There would be no more than 9 guests at a gathering of this importance. The Roman dining room is designed for exactly 9, 3 per couch, reclining on the left elbow, the right hand free to reach toward the food on the table between them. Any more guests than 9 would be a practical impossibility. Any fewer than 7 at a dinner honoring the dictator of Rome would be an insult. Lepidus would want a full complement. He would want the evening to go well. Lepidus is Caesar's master of horse, his second in command, the man he trusts to hold Rome in order while he campaigns abroad. He is not brilliant, he is not particularly charismatic. He is loyal, organized, reliable, and politically savvy enough to understand that in an era of strong men, competent loyalty is the most valuable currency. Caesar has rewarded him accordingly. Land, money, a position of enormous prestige. Lepidus has done well from Caesar, and he knows it, and he will do well from whoever comes after Caesar too, because men like Lepidus have a talent for that kind of calculation. He does not know, as he arranges the cushions on the couches and supervises the slaves preparing the food, that the man sitting on his right is planning to murder Caesar tomorrow morning. Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus arrives early. He is somewhere in his early 40s, born around 81 BC, which makes him perhaps 15 years younger than Caesar, bearded in the fashion he cultivated during his years fighting alongside Caesar in Gaul, a stocky man who carries himself with the easy confidence of someone who has commanded armies. He was raised partly in the company of men who would become Caesar's enemies and allies both. He spent time as a young man with Publius Clodius, with Gaius Curio, even with the young Mark Antony, that whole generation of Roman political men who would tear the Republic apart. He and Lepidus greet each other warmly. They have fought side by side, they share the same patron. In every external sense, they are the same kind of man. Caesar arrives last. He always arrives last. He is 55 years old and he looks it. Suetonius, writing later, describes him as tall, fair-complexioned, with well-built limbs, a full face and keen black eyes. But that is the description of a younger man. The campaigns of the past decade, Gaul, the civil wars, Spain, Africa, Egypt, have taken something from him that victories cannot replace. He moves more carefully now. His physicians have been concerned about vertigo, about the small seizures that have followed him since middle age. He combs his thinning hair forward over his forehead to cover the baldness that embarrasses him, and wears the laurel wreath at all times. Suetonius notes that among all the honors the Senate heaped upon him, the right to wear the wreath was the one he prized most personally, because it served a purpose beyond honor. He takes his place on the center couch, the place of honor, the locus medius. The guests recline around him. Slaves move around the room with the first course, the gustatio, the Roman hors d'oeuvres. Salted olives, eggs, small dishes of vegetables, a light wine mixed with honey called mulsum. The lamps are already lit. In early March, in Rome, the evenings come quickly and the hills block the last of the daylight before the city is ready to stop working. The room smells of olive oil and wine and the beeswax of the lamps. Music perhaps, a flute player in the corner, or a boy reading poetry. This would be the kind of dinner that Caesar, who worked at dinner. Plutarch notes that he sealed letters and signed documents even while reclining at the table, because time itself was something he refused to waste, would tolerate more than enjoy. He preferred conversation. He preferred the kind of intellectual exchange that Roman elites considered the proper purpose of a dinner party, not just eating but thinking together, demonstrating the quality of one's mind. And so the conversation turns, as Roman dinner conversations always eventually do, to questions that matter. At some point in the evening, Plutarch records this, drawing it from sources contemporary with the events. The question arises, what is the best kind of death for a man to have? It is not a morbid question, not in Rome, not in this era. It is the kind of philosophical inquiry that Roman men of education ask each other because it reveals the architecture of a man's values. The Stoics have an answer. The Epicureans have a different one. The soldiers have theirs. Every man at this table has a view. Caesar answers before anyone else can speak. A sudden and unexpected death, he says. That is the best kind, quick, without suffering, without time to be afraid. There is a specific texture to this moment that takes a moment to feel fully. Around this table, Lepidus, who will survive the next decade and a half through pure political flexibility. Caesar, who has 4 days before he leaves for the greatest campaign of his life and cannot imagine that he will not complete it. And Decimus, who has a knife hidden somewhere and a plan, and who is listening to the man he is going to kill tomorrow, describe the ideal circumstances of his own death. Barry Strauss, who has written the most careful modern account of the assassination, puts it with perfect economy. The question is how Decimus kept a straight face. Perhaps he was thinking about something else, the logistics of tomorrow, the positioning of the gladiators at the theatre entrance, the order in which the senators would need to move, perhaps the capacity that made Decimus such an effective military commander, the ability to hold a plan in his mind and execute it without flinching, to maintain control of his face and voice, while making irreversible decisions, served him here too. A man who can lead a fleet into battle, who can besiege a city, who can manage the complex logistics of keeping thousands of men fed and armed and pointed in the right direction, can probably manage a dinner party. The evening continues. The main course arrives, then the dessert. Wine comes around in successive rounds, mixed with water as is proper, though at a dinner in Caesar's honor the ratio presumably leans toward the wine. Caesar seals letters at the table, correspondence, documents, the machine of his administration running even on this evening. And then the dinner ends. Roman dinners end in a specific way. The host calls for sandals, the signal that the evening is concluded. Guests exchange farewells, the slaves bring their cloaks. People who have traveled to the Palatine begin the process of getting home. Decimus says goodnight to Caesar with whatever expression a man uses when he has decided to kill someone and they do not know it. What does that look like from the outside? Apparently normal. Caesar makes his way back down the hill to the Domus Publica, his home. The official residence of the Pontifex Maximus, the highest religious office in Rome, the position he has held since he was 33 years old, when he campaigned so aggressively for it, that he told his mother on the morning of the election that he would either return as Pontifex Maximus or not return at all. The Domus Publica sits in the heart of the Forum on the Via Sacra, the sacred road, the oldest street in Rome, flanked by the Temple of Vesta and the House of the Vestal Virgins, between the sacred spears of Mars and the eternal flame that has not been extinguished in living memory. It is a house that belongs to the office, not the man. When Caesar dies, it will pass to Lepidus. But Caesar has lived here for over 20 years, and it is in every meaningful sense his. He goes inside. The door closes. Somewhere on the other side of the city, in a house near the Subura, or perhaps on the Aventine. The sources do not specify exactly where Brutus lived. Marcus Junius Brutus is not sleeping. Part 2. The night Rome did not sleep. Midnight, the first hours before dawn. Rome at night is not quiet. The city has no night carts during the day. Wheeled vehicles are banned from the streets during daylight hours to prevent the streets from becoming impassable, so everything moves at night. The grain from Ostia, the timber from the Tiber docks, the stone for Caesar's new forum, still under construction a few hundred yards from where he sleeps, all of it moves in the dark, on wheels that crack against the uneven cobblestones, drawn by donkeys whose hooves echo off the narrow walls of streets that in some places are barely wide enough for 2 people to pass. The Subura, the great crowded district of ordinary Romans, the apartment blocks stacked 5 and 6 stories high, the workshops and the food stalls and the wine bars, is never truly quiet, even at 3 in the morning. Someone is always awake, someone is always arguing, someone is always doing something. There are perhaps 500,000 people in Rome in March of 44 BC, jammed into a city that was not designed to hold that many. The wealthy live on the hills, the Palatine, the Aventine, the Esquiline, their houses set back from the streets behind walls and gardens. The vast majority live in the insulae, the apartment buildings that can be rented by the floor, the families that can't afford a full floor living in single rooms, sometimes sharing with other families, the poorest sleeping on straw on the ground level near the shop fronts. Above them, the apartments step back and diminish until the topmost rooms are barely habitable in the cold. But it is March now, and spring is coming, and the city carries the particular restlessness of a population that has been cold all winter and is beginning to remember warmth. In 3 separate houses, in 3 separate neighborhoods, 3 men lie awake. In the Domus Publica, on the Via Sacra, Julius Caesar does not sleep well. He and Calpurnia are in the same room as they always are. She is 30 years his junior, born around 75 BC, so somewhere in her early 30s now, the daughter of the senator Lucius Calpurnius Piso, a woman who has been married to the most powerful man in the world for over a decade and has learned to hold herself quietly inside that fact. She is not a woman who appears often in the historical record while alive. She appears mostly in the record of this night, which tells us something about how Roman women's lives were documented, or weren't. They have no children. Caesar has no legitimate heir. Octavian, his great-nephew, is named in his will, but is a teenager in Greece, not a son, not the clear succession that a dynasty requires. This is one of the most dangerous facts about Caesar's position, something his enemies use and his friends worry over privately. If Caesar dies, the line of succession is unclear. The soldiers he has commanded for a decade may not simply transfer their loyalty to a Senate that many of them have never met. What follows could be anything. Calpurnia is not given to superstition. This is the detail that Plutarch emphasizes, and it is worth emphasizing again. She had never before shown this kind of fear. She was, by all accounts, a composed woman, someone who had navigated the extraordinary pressures of being Caesar's wife, the affairs, the absences, the political crises, the constant danger without anything that the sources describe as dramatic distress. Which is why when she wakes in the middle of the night making sounds that Caesar has never heard from her before, weeping and half-speaking in sleep the way people do when the dream is real enough to be lived rather than watched, it has a different weight than it would from someone else. In her dream, according to Plutarch, and there are at least 2 versions recorded with the sources themselves noting they cannot fully agree, she holds Caesar's body in her arms, his blood running through her hands, warm and already cooling. In another version, which Plutarch attributes to Livy, she watches the ornamental gable of their house crumbling away. Both versions converge on the essential point. When she wakes and finds the windows of the bedroom blowing open in a cold wind and the room filled with strange grey light, she reaches for Caesar and finds him there. She tells him what she saw. In the Domus Publica at this hour, kept in a sealed room in the complex that connects Caesar's residence to the Regia, the ancient house of Rome's pontifical archives, there are the sacred spears of Mars. These weapons, which Rome has brought out before every campaign since the founding of the city, are said to rattle of their own accord when war or catastrophe approaches. A story circulated later, unverifiable but recorded, that on this night the spears were heard to move in their holders. Caesar lies there in the dark. He is not a superstitious man in the sense that he takes omens personally, but he is a politician and a Roman, and he understands that the symbolic weight of signs and portents is a political fact, regardless of whether they are metaphysically real. If he dismisses Calpurnia's dream and something happens, that dismissal will be part of the story forever. If he heeds it and nothing happens, he loses nothing but a mourning. He does not fall back asleep. Across the city, Marcus Junius Brutus is also awake. He has not slept at all tonight. He says so himself. Plutarch records the detail. Brutus spent the night awake, and the phrasing suggests it was characteristic of the days leading up to the Ides, not a single unusual night. Portia, his wife, has noticed. She has watched him for weeks, becoming someone she doesn't entirely recognize, not sleeping, not eating properly, staring at things that aren't there, scratching his head with excessive violence, according to Plutarch's precise observation, when he thinks no one is watching. Brutus is 40 years old. He is a philosopher in the genuine, serious sense, not as an affectation, but as the center of his intellectual life. He has written treatises on Stoic ethics. He has studied Plato with enough depth to have formed real opinions about the academy versus the peripatetics. He corresponds with Cicero about the nature of moral duty. He is someone who has thought, in detail, about what it means to do the right thing and who believes, with genuine conviction, not merely as a pose, that there are things more important than his own survival or comfort. This makes him both the ideal conspirator and the worst one. Ideal, because the conspiracy needs his name and his reputation and the moral weight of a man who is universally understood to be acting from principle rather than ambition. Worst, because he cannot stop thinking about whether it's right. He knows what Cassius knows about Caesar, that he is concentrating power in ways that will not be reversible, that he has made himself dictator for life, that the Senate he nominally answers to has been packed with his own men until it resembles a court more than a governing body. Brutus knows all of this. He has watched it happen, and yet Caesar pardoned him after Pharsalus when he could have had him killed. Caesar gave him a praetorship, the second highest judicial office in Rome. Caesar trusted him. Caesar, by many accounts, liked him. And then there is the rumor that refuses to die. Caesar had a long affair with Brutus's mother, Servilia. This is not disputed. It is as well established as anything in this period. Everyone in Rome knows it. The affair lasted decades, and the rumor that follows from it, that Brutus is Caesar's son, not merely his protégé, that the bond between them is biological as well as political, is mathematically impossible. Caesar was 15 when Brutus was born, but psychologically resilient. Brutus knows about it. He grew up inside it, and whatever he thinks about it, whether he dismisses it or whether it lives in some quiet part of him, as a half-believed thing, he cannot not know that when Caesar sees him, there is something in Caesar's regard that goes beyond what a powerful man feels for a useful subordinate. His wife, Porcia, knows something is wrong. She has known for weeks. Earlier, not tonight, but some days ago, she did something that still stuns anyone who reads about it carefully. She took a barber's knife, sent her servants away, and cut a deep gash in her own thigh. She sat with the wound for 3 days, untreated, through fever and pain, and then went to Brutus and showed him. She said, "I am Cato's daughter. I was not brought into your house as a concubine, but as a partner. If I can endure this, I can keep your secret. Now tell me what you're carrying." Brutus raised his hands to the sky and prayed that he would be worthy of her. He may never have told her specifically. The sources suggest they were interrupted before he could give her the details. But she knows, and the wound is still there, healing on the inside of her thigh. He lies in the garden now. The sources say he preferred the open air when he couldn't sleep, and stares at the stars above Rome. Earlier in the evening, before midnight, the conspirators came to him. Cassius, Casca, Cimber, Trebonius, Cinna, Decimus, and others, filing through his gate in the dark. Men he has known for years, wearing the expression of men about to do something they cannot undo. They gathered in his garden and spoke in low voices about logistics. Who stands where? Who approaches first? Who stays near the door to watch for Mark Antony? Who keeps the gladiators in position outside? Brutus made 2 decisions that the others accepted. First, no oath. Cassius wanted a formal vow to bind them together. Brutus refused. If their cause requires an oath to sustain it, he said, then their cause is not strong enough. Honorable men acting for an honorable reason need no oath. No coward and no deceiver should take this oath, so there can be no oath worth taking. His reasoning is entirely philosophical, and at least 2 of the men standing in his garden probably think it's naive. But Brutus is the leader, because Brutus is the name, and the name is what makes this more than a murder. Second, Mark Antony lives. Cassius wanted him killed alongside Caesar, and Cassius is not wrong to want this. Antony is co-consul. He commands the loyalty of Caesar's legions. He is physically imposing and politically shrewd, and he will not simply accept his patron's death and go quietly into private practice. Cassius sees this clearly, but Brutus says no. They are tyrannicides, not assassins. They kill Caesar because he represents a principle, the concentration of power in one man's hands, not because of personal enmity. To kill Antony as well is to make it personal, to make it about politics and power rather than principle. Brutus will not do it. Both of these decisions will prove within days to be catastrophic, but Brutus does not know that yet. He lies in the garden under the night sky of Rome and does not sleep. Gaius Cassius Longinus is somewhere else in the city, also awake, but his wakefulness has a different quality. Cassius is the engine of all this. He was the one who first approached Brutus, who had been leaving anonymous notes on his bench for weeks. Wake up, Brutus. You are not truly Brutus, who organized the meeting networks and the timing and the location and the operational details of the plan. He is sharper than Brutus, colder, more practical. Where Brutus agonizes over philosophy, Cassius calculates. He has been calculating the problem of Antony for weeks. He is calculating it again tonight. What Cassius is thinking about, in the small hours of March 14th, is what happens after. Not the act itself. That part is settled. The positions are assigned. The daggers are hidden. What happens after? They have 60 men who have agreed to participate. They have gladiators at the ready in case of immediate mob violence. They have a prepared speech that Brutus will deliver to the Senate, explaining the act in terms of republican principle and inviting the senators to affirm what has been done. What Cassius cannot control and cannot stop thinking about is the response. The plan depends on the Senate applauding. It depends on the men in that room, men who have their own reasons to resent Caesar, men who have watched their authority eroded and their dignity dismissed. It depends on them standing up in that moment and saying, yes, this was right. We are free. If that happens, Antony is isolated. Octavian is too young and too far away. The veterans of Caesar's legions are dispersed throughout the provinces. There will be grief, and there will be anger, and some of it will be dangerous, but the political machinery will reassert itself, and Rome will remember what it is. That is the plan. Cassius has no way of knowing, in the dark of the 14th of March, that not a single senator will stay, that every man in the room will run, that Mark Antony will be outside, alive, not dead, with a full consul's access to Caesar's papers and Caesar's soldiers and Caesar's money for the Parthian campaign, and a natural gift for oratory that he has not yet had occasion to fully use. The city hums and rattles around him. He does not sleep either. He runs the numbers one more time. In the morning, everything will begin. Part 3. The Sings the Gods Sent. Dawn of March 15th, the first hour. The Ides of March is a festival day. Romans know it as one of several sacred dates on their calendar, a day of religious observances and military celebrations, a day dedicated to the god Mars, whose month this is. The word Ides comes from the Latin iduare, meaning to divide. The Ides falls in the middle of the month, and in March it falls on the 15th. It is a day of sacrifice and ceremony, of public ritual, a day when priests conduct the formal business of connecting Rome to its gods. The city would have been preparing for days, processions forming. The usual noise of Roman public life pitched a degree higher, the way it always gets when the city has something collective to celebrate. Caesar would have been aware of the date's significance. It was one reason the Senate session was called for today rather than tomorrow or the day after. The Ides were auspicious. Important business was conducted on auspicious days, and this session was particularly important. According to several ancient sources, among the honors the Senate intended to bestow upon Caesar was one that had been discussed in whispers for months. The title of Rex, king, was to be formally proposed, but only for territories outside Italy. A semantic distinction, the senators who would walk in to vote had their own private understandings of what this really meant. The men hidden inside their togas, with daggers strapped to their forearms, had theirs. The sun has not yet risen fully when Calpurnia wakes from her dream. She has been a composed woman throughout her marriage to the most powerful man in Rome. Caesar has been absent for years at a time, fighting wars. He has had affairs, his relationship with Cleopatra is not a secret, and the child some say they have together is not a secret either. She is currently staying at Caesar's garden villa on the other side of the Tiber, less than 2 miles from where Calpurnia sleeps. A woman married to Julius Caesar learns composure early, or she does not survive the marriage. But what she experienced in the night was something else. The exact content varies between our ancient sources. Plutarch gives one version, Livy another, and the sources themselves note that these versions disagree, but in the version that became most widely told, she saw Caesar's body in her arms, his blood running through her hands. Warm and already cooling, she woke and found the windows of the room standing open and the air cold and strange. She reached for Caesar. He was alive and present, and she told him, "Do not go." Caesar is not a superstitious man. He has said so repeatedly across a career of military campaigns in which other generals read omens obsessively, and he simply attacked. He once told a terrified sailor before a sea crossing that he should have no fear. He was sailing with Caesar. He disbanded his bodyguard on the grounds that a life spent in permanent fear of death was not worth living. Fortune, he believed, was real, but it could be bent by will. He has bent it repeatedly, but this morning is different. Perhaps it is the accumulated weight of the warnings that came before, Spurina's alert at the Lupercalia 30 days ago, on the 15th of February, at the great festival where Mark Antony placed a diadem on Caesar's head and the crowd stayed silent. Spurina the Horospex had been reading the entrails of a sacrificial bull and found no heart. The heart was simply absent. He told Caesar, "Your life is in danger for the next 30 days, ending on the Ides of March." Caesar had been mildly dismissive. The ides were a month away. He had his Parthian campaign to plan, and now the ides are here. He orders the household priests to conduct sacrifices. They take the first animal. They inspect the entrails. The heart is missing. This is not a literary device. This is a specific physical finding recorded in multiple ancient sources, including, and this matters, Cicero, who was alive at the time, was known to Spurina personally and was writing about these events to correspondents within months of them occurring. When a haruspex says the heart is missing from a sacrificial animal, he means exactly that. The organ is not present in the body cavity. How this happens, whether it is a genuine anatomical anomaly, a deliberate fraud, or something that ancient priests interpreted differently than we do, is a separate question. What matters for our purposes is that the priests looked, and they reported it, and Caesar heard it, and he did not dismiss it. The priests conduct a second sacrifice. The liver is malformed. A Roman haruspex reads the liver the way a modern doctor reads an ECG. Specific zones correspond to specific meanings, and specific abnormalities in those zones carry specific prognoses. A malformed liver is not a vague bad sign. It is a precise message from the gods, saying something about the man for whom the sacrifice was conducted, and the something it is saying is not favorable. Caesar hesitates. For the first time in a career built on forward motion, on crossing every river that presented itself, on refusing to let fear enter the space between intention and action, he stops. He sends word to Mark Antony, "Go to the theatre of Pompey. Tell the senators the session is postponed on account of inauspicious omens. The sitting is dissolved. He is staying home. Now let us cross the city to the theatre of Pompey and watch the conspirators hear this news." The theatre of Pompey complex sits in the Campus Martius, the Field of Mars, the great open space northwest of the city's ancient center, outside the Pomerium, the sacred boundary that defines Rome's ceremonial limit. The Campus Martius is where Rome holds its military exercises, its public assemblies, its elections. It is also since 55 BC where Pompey the Great built his extraordinary gift to the city, the first permanent stone theatre in Rome, with its 300 seats and its gardens and its colonnaded porticos, and at the far end of those porticos, a meeting room for the Senate. It is in that meeting room that Brutus and Cassius are now waiting. As urban praetor, the judge responsible for civil disputes, it is Brutus's obligation to hear petitions from the public in the mornings, and he does so now. He stands at his bench or sits and listens to men explain their legal complaints. He rules on small matters. He is as calm externally as a man can be, given what is in his toga. Plutarch preserves the observation that anyone who knew what was about to happen would have been astonished at the unshakable calm of Brutus and Cassius in these hours. They have been waiting since the session was scheduled to begin. The hour passes. Caesar has not come. Another hour passes. Senators file in and out, make conversation, discuss the business of the day. Antony, Caesar's co-consul, is present. He doesn't know. Nobody tells him anything. Then the word comes. Caesar has sent Antony to dissolve the session. The dictator is not attending. The sitting is postponed. For a long suspended moment, everything the conspirators have built stands on the edge of dissolution. There are 60 of them, 60 senators who carry this secret, which is already, as Cassius has understood from the beginning, far too many. Secrets in Rome travel at the speed of whispers, and Rome is full of people who trade in whispers. 2 days before the ides, Cassius had gathered the conspirators and told them, "If any of you are discovered, you are to turn your daggers on yourselves." Now they have a new problem. Caesar has cancelled the session. Cassius finds Brutus. There is a rapid, quiet conference. If Caesar does not come today, when does he come? He is leaving for Parthia in 4 days. That window closes, and once it closes, it may never reopen. As Caesar in the field, with his legions around him, is unreachable. And if any of 60 men loses nerve in the next 4 days and speaks to someone, the entire conspiracy collapses into whatever comes after. And then the situation becomes worse. A senator named Popilius Laenas approaches Brutus and Cassius. He greets them, smiling, with somewhat more warmth than is usual. Then he leans close and says, very quietly, that he joins them in praying for the accomplishment of what they have in mind, and urges them not to delay, because the matter is on men's tongues. He walks away before they can respond. Cassius's hand moves toward the dagger under his toga. Brutus watches Popilius Laenas cross the room and speak to other people. His expression relaxed, apparently making a personal request of some kind. Brutus reads the room. He forces his face into something neutral, and by that steadiness, which Plutarch calls the cheerfulness of his countenance, he gives Cassius back his composure. Popilius Laenus is not informing. He is simply a man who has noticed things and wants to be seen as sympathetic to whichever faction prevails. He is doing what Romans of his class have been doing in this era of political violence for a generation. Positioning himself, his whisper to Brutus and Cassius is not a warning, but a calculation, and it passes without consequence. But the conspiracy still has a problem. Caesar has not come. The session is ending. The gladiators Decimus has stationed near the entrance are standing there for nothing. And somewhere on the other side of the city, in the Domus Publica on the Via Sacra, Caesar is still inside his house. Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus is the one who will fix this. He has done it before. He will do it now. He is already getting dressed. Part 4. The man who walked Caesar to his death. The 3rd to 4th hour of March 15. Here is what we know about Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus at the moment. He walks through the door of the Domus Publica on the morning of the 15th of March. He is approximately 42 years old. He has spent most of his adult life in Caesar's service. He commanded the fleet that Caesar used to blockade Massilia during the Civil War, winning 2 naval battles that helped break the city's resistance, the kind of tactical victory that made his reputation. He governed provinces in Gaul on Caesar's behalf. He commanded gladiatorial shows, which is where the men standing outside the theater of Pompeii right now came from. Caesar trusted him completely in the absolute and unreserved way that Caesar trusted almost no one. Cassius Dio records it plainly. When Caesar was asked whom he considered most reliable, he would say Decimus Brutus. Not Marcus Brutus, not Antony. Decimus, the man who has just walked through his door. Caesar even named Decimus second heir in his will, behind only the 18-year-old Octavian who is currently studying in Greece. Caesar had selected him for the consulship in 2 years. Consul, the highest elected office in the Roman Republic, the one every senator of ambition spends his career trying to reach. Caesar had given this to Decimus in advance, as a gift, and Decimus betrayed him anyway. The sources disagree, as they always do, on the exact motivation. The most honest answer is that we don't fully know. The most likely reason, the one that Barry Strauss, who has spent years with these texts, finds most persuasive, is the Roman concept of honor, specifically a very particular kind of honor that Romans understood at a level close to what we would call identity. Caesar had denied Decimus a triumph, the formal public parade through Rome that celebrates a victorious general, the triumphal procession with its chariot and its captives and its crowds and its specific rituals that had not changed in centuries. Caesar had granted this to lesser generals and withheld it from Decimus, perhaps to keep him dependent, perhaps out of indifference, perhaps for reasons that are now impossible to reconstruct. But in Decimus's world, in the world of Roman senatorial honor, this was not a slight you absorbed. This was who you were or weren't. Decimus wasn't. Whether it was this or ideology or simply the calculating logic of a military man who looked at Caesar and decided the odds had shifted, we don't know. What we know is the method. What we know is the conversation he is about to have. He enters the atrium of the Domus Publica. The lamps are still burning. It is still morning, the light outside grey and cold. March in Rome, which is not quite spring yet. The kind of day when you can feel winter not quite finished with the city. Calpurnia is there. Caesar is there, still in the household, dressed for a normal morning but not yet prepared to leave, the toga not fully arranged. The day's intentions still uncertain in the way that a day becomes uncertain when the person at its center has made a decision that everyone around them knows is unusual. Decimus has been told that Caesar sent Antony to dissolve the senators. He pretends he has not been told this. He greets Caesar warmly. He asks after his health, which is genuine concern wrapped in a purpose. Caesar has not been well, and Decimus knows it, and the question lands differently because of that knowledge. He congratulates him on the coming campaign. He mentions something small and specific, perhaps, about the preparations for Parthia, the kind of detail that signals, "I have been thinking about your interests. I am here as a friend." And then he lets it drop. As if remembering something, the Senate is waiting. What he says next is preserved in 2 primary sources, which agree on the substance, if not the precise wording. Plutarch records that Decimus spoke scoffingly of the seers and chided Caesar for laying himself open to malicious charges on the part of the senators, suggesting that if Caesar stayed home because of omens, the Senate would see it as contempt or as proof of the weakness his enemies have been whispering about. Nicolaus of Damascus is more direct. He records the substance of Decimus's speech almost verbatim. "What is this, Caesar? Are you a man to pay attention to a woman's dreams and the idle gossip of stupid men, and to insult the Senate by not going out when they have honored you and have been specially summoned by you? But listen to me, cast aside the forebodings of all these people, and come. The Senate has been in session waiting for you since early this morning." The mechanism of this speech is worth pausing on because it is surgical. Decimus knows Caesar. He has known him for 15 years. He knows that the one thing Caesar cannot endure, more than physical danger, more than political defeat, is the implication that he is afraid, that he has been controlled by anyone, let alone by his wife and her nightmare. The senators have been saying for years that Caesar is becoming a king, that he is acting like someone above the laws that govern other men. If Caesar stays home today because of a dream, those senators will tell each other that the man who conquered Gaul was afraid of the dark. And there is the whisper about the crown. Decimus mentions, and this detail appears in the sources in varying degrees of clarity, that the Senate today may be planning to formally offer Caesar the title of Rex for territories outside Italy. The thing Caesar has been maneuvering toward for years. If Caesar isn't there, they might rescind the offer, or worse, offer it anyway, and have it refused on his behalf without his consent, which would be a humiliation. Whether this last element is exactly what Decimus said, or how he framed it, we can't verify with certainty, but it fits the man, and it fits the moment. Decimus was not a subtle man in the literary sense. He left no essays, no philosophical correspondence. He was a practical man, a military man, a man who understood leverage. He knew exactly how to move Caesar because he had watched him for 15 years and catalogued every lever. Calpurnia is in the room. She is watching this. She has been awake since before dawn. She has already argued everything she knows how to argue, and now she is watching the man her husband trusts most in the world take apart her arguments one by one. She says nothing. She is 30 years old, and she is the wife of Julius Caesar, and there is nothing she can do. Caesar looks at Calpurnia. He looks at Decimus. He calls for his toga. The purple-bordered toga of his office is arranged around him by the household slaves. His laurel wreath, the right that he values more than almost any other, is set on his thinning hair. Decimus stays close, accompanying him, talking. The sources suggest he talked continuously, keeping Caesar's attention forward, not giving him time to turn back toward Calpurnia, toward the priests, toward any second thought. Decimus is not nervous. He has not been nervous for days, not since before the meetings in the garden. He has the steady focus of a man who has committed to something and is now simply completing it. Before they leave, one more sacrifice is attempted. It fails. Caesar looks at the results. According to Suetonius, he announces almost impatiently that he will treat these unfavorable signs the way Alephina did, a Greek reference to a man who was afraid to look at an unfavorable omen and died anyway. In other words, I see what the signs say. I'm going regardless. He has made his choice. He is not going to be a man who is governed by fear. He is carried to the theatre of Pompey in his litter. Decimus walks alongside, talking. The route from the Domus Publica to the theatre of Pompey is perhaps a mile and a half through the heart of Rome. The city is busy with the ides. It is a festival day, a public holiday in the formal sense, which means the baths are full and the temples are conducting ceremonies and the street food stalls are doing their best business of the week. The smell of smoke from sacrificial fires mixes with the ordinary morning smell of bread and lamp oil and the particular organic smell of 500,000 people living close together in a city without effective sewage. On the way, people approach the litter. Several try to reach Caesar with warnings. A teacher of rhetoric named Artemidorus, a man from Cnidus in Asia Minor, who has somehow obtained precise details about the conspiracy through the social networks that make Rome simultaneously the most powerful and most permeable political system in the ancient world, approaches the litter and presses a written document into Caesar's hands. According to Suetonius, this document contains specific information: the names of the conspirators, the plan, the time. Caesar is literally holding the names of the men who are going to kill him on a piece of papyrus in his left hand. He adds it to the bundle of petitions he is already carrying. He will read it at the session, he thinks. He will deal with it later. He will not deal with it later. Near the entrance to the theatre complex, Spurina is waiting in the crowd. Caesar sees him and speaks first. "The Ides of March have come," Caesar says pleasantly, perhaps even with a slight edge of superiority, the way a man speaks to a person whose prediction has so far failed to materialize. "I am here, I am alive, the Ides have come." Spurinna replies, "Yes, Caesar, but they have not yet gone." Caesar steps through the entrance. Decimus walks with him to the door of the meeting room, and perhaps a few steps inside. He has done what he came to do. The gladiators are in position, the senators are assembled, the daggers are ready, everything is in place. The walk. Caesar's litter moves west and north through the morning city. He is carried on the shoulders of slaves, a mode of transport that suits both his status and his uncertain health, through streets that are busy with the festival, past temples conducting their Ide ceremonies, past the forum crowds, into the Campus Martius where the theatre of Pompey's enormous cavea rises over the rooftops. In the litter, the bundle of petitions in his left hand, including the note from Artemidorus. Decimus talks. Caesar perhaps looks out at the city he has bent to his will this spring morning in Rome, 4 days before he was meant to leave for Parthia with 50,000 men and the ambition to conquer what Alexander conquered. Near the entrance, Spurinna, "The Ides have come," Caesar says. "They have not yet gone," Spurinna replies. Caesar steps inside. Part 5. Inside the room. The 5th to 6th hour of March 15th, just after noon. The Curia of Pompeii is not a grand building. This is worth establishing before we describe what happens inside it, because everything about the mythology of the assassination, the paintings, the dramatizations, the way it lives in the imagination, tends toward grandeur. The vast marble halls of Roman power that painters and dramatists have preferred, the high ceilings, the soaring columns, the whole vocabulary of state authority made physical. What Caesar actually walks into is an exedra, an architectural term for a room with a curved back wall, shaped something like a semicircle, attached to the colonnaded porticos of the theatre complex. It accommodated the Senate, up to 600 senators if all attended, though most sessions were smaller than that. Barry Strauss, drawing on the archaeology of the site at Lago di Torre Argentina, describes it as a nicely decorated room but not cavernous. There are tiered benches along the curved back wall for the senators to sit on, a raised platform for the presiding magistrate. The ambient noise of the gladiatorial games playing in the theatre nearby, which began this morning audible through the walls, the crowd's occasional roar when someone falls or bleeds, and at the far end of the room, on a raised pedestal, the large marble statue of Pompey the Great, Caesar's rival, the man he defeated in the civil war that redefined Rome. The man who died with his head cut off on an Egyptian beach in 48 BC, his body left unburied for days. Pompey, watching the proceedings from his pedestal, in the building he built, waiting. The senators who are part of the conspiracy are distributed through the room according to their assigned positions. About 60 men have been recruited. The accounts of how many vary from 20 to 80, as the accounts of everything about this day vary, but not all will strike. Some are positioned to prevent Caesar's escape, some are stationed near the door. All of them have daggers hidden in the folds of their togas, which is logistically awkward and psychologically significant. They have been sitting here in this room with their hidden weapons for the better part of 2 hours. The senators who are not part of the conspiracy are here too, the ordinary senators, the men who received a summons and came to do the work of the Republic, who don't know what they are about to witness. Gaius Trebonius is waiting at the door. His assignment, which was settled in the meetings at Brutus's house, is to keep Mark Antony occupied outside. When Caesar's litter arrives and he steps down, Trebonius intercepts Antony and begins a conversation about something. We don't know what, but he is skilled enough at this kind of thing to keep it going for the time it takes. Antony stands outside the theatre entrance and talks. He will stay outside. He will survive today. He will be, in the assessment of history, the most important person at this event who was not in the room. Caesar takes his seat. The whole Senate rises as he enters, which is the protocol. The senators stand for the dictator, acknowledging his position above them. He sits down. The session begins. The senators who have been sitting with their daggers hidden, watching the entrance for 2 hours, wait for the signal. It is Lucius Tillius Cimber who makes the approach. This was planned well in advance, because Cimber has a legitimate reason to be in front of Caesar. He genuinely has a petition, requesting the recall of his brother from exile. It is the kind of personal appeal Caesar handles regularly, the kind of small act of clemency that has built his reputation as a man who shows mercy to his enemies. Simba goes forward. The other conspirators gather around him, joining their voices to the petition. Normal enough, senators supporting a colleague's request. Caesar looks up at the cluster of men crowding toward him and makes a dismissive gesture. Not now. The day's business first. He is still waving them off when Simba grabs his toga at the shoulder and pulls it down. "This is the signal," Caesar cries out. The sources give his words in Latin, "Ista quidem vis est." This is violence. He tries to rise from his chair. He is strong for his age and still has the reflexes of a man who has led soldiers on battlefields across the known world. Publius Servilius Casca is standing behind the chair. He drives his knife at Caesar's throat. He misses the first blow of the assassination of Julius Caesar, misses entirely, or wounds him only shallowly near the shoulder, not the killing blow Casca intended. Caesar reaches back and grabs Casca's arm. He is fighting. He cries out again. Casca, in a panic, calls in Greek to his brother, "Brother, help." What follows is, by every ancient account, chaos. The room explodes. Men are rushing forward from all directions, daggers drawn. Caesar is spinning, grabbing at hands, twisting away from blows, doing what a soldier does when attacked from multiple sides, looking for the angle of escape, looking for the weak point. Aphelion writes that he kept turning from one to another of them with furious cries, like a wild beast cornered. Plutarch records the detail that in the frenzy of blades striking from every direction, some of the conspirators wounded each other. Brutus took a knife in the hand. All of them were covered in blood before it was over, their own and Caesar's impossible to separate. Then Caesar sees Brutus. Brutus is standing in front of him, dagger drawn. The sources diverge here in a way that has occupied historians for 2,000 years, and the divergence itself is meaningful. Cassius Dio and Suetonius say Caesar said nothing, that he fell silent when he saw Brutus and yielded to the blows. Plutarch says he pulled his toga over his head, the gesture of a Roman man composing himself for death, covering his face in the manner of a man who has decided not to watch what is coming. Some sources, including a tradition that Suetonius records without fully endorsing, say he spoke in Greek as he went down. Kai su teknon. You too, child. Whether this is a curse, some classicists read it as a prediction, a Greek proverb meaning you'll have your turn too, or an expression of shock, or simply something someone invented later and repeated until it stuck. We genuinely do not know. What we know is that Plutarch, drawing on the earliest sources, says that when Caesar saw Brutus's dagger, he stopped fighting. He pulls the toga over his face. He lets go. The blows continue. 23 in total, according to the physician Antistius, who later conducts what may be the first recorded forensic autopsy in recorded history. He examines the body carefully and determines that of 23 wounds, only one was fatal. The second blow struck to the chest between the ribs. One wound, the rest, 22 of them, were in clinical terms unnecessary. They are the product of 60 frightened men with knives working themselves into the act simultaneously, stabbing after the fact, each one wanting to be part of it, each one ensuring his complicity in a way that would bind him to the others. Caesar staggers backward. He falls at the base of the pedestal of Pompey's statue. Plutarch writes, the pedestal was drenched with blood, so that one might have thought that Pompey himself was presiding over this act of vengeance against his enemy, who now lay at his feet, twitching with so many wounds. The dictator of Rome is dead. He is lying at the feet of the man he destroyed. For a long moment, nothing moves. The senators who were not part of the conspiracy are frozen at their benches, staring at the blood on the floor, at the men standing over the body with weapons still in their hands, at the thing that has just happened in this room. They are processing. The act is so much larger than the room it happened in, the implications so immediate and so vast that none of them can move. Brutus steps forward. He opens his mouth to speak. He has prepared a speech, carefully considered, philosophically grounded, the full explanation of why this was not murder but tyrannicide, not violence but liberation. He is going to explain. He is going to invite the Senate to affirm what has been done, to stand up and call themselves free. Every senator in the room who is not a conspirator turns and runs. They push for the door in a mass, scrambling over each other, and pour out into the porticos of Pompey's theatre, into the gardens, into the streets of the Campus Martius. The gladiators in the theatre hear the commotion and the audience panics. People pour out of the theatre into the same streets. Senators and spectators and slaves and tradespeople all running in the same direction, away. Within minutes, the area around the theatre complex is chaos. A city that has just witnessed an earthquake trying to figure out which way the ground is going to move. Brutus stands in the nearly empty room. Caesar's body is at his feet. The speech he prepared is undelivered. Outside, Rome is silent. Mark Antony has already heard what happened. He strips off his toga. A senator right now is a target. He is wearing plain clothes underneath. He disappears into the crowd. He will reappear. And when he does, everything the conspirators thought they had achieved will begin to come undone. Part 6. The Silence After. The 6th hour to the end of day, March 15, 44 BC. The conspirators leave the room together. Plutarch describes their departure with a detail that has stayed in the historical record for 2,000 years, because it is so precisely wrong about what comes next. They walked out not like fugitives, but with glad faces and full of confidence. Their togas and hands are red with blood. They move through the colonnaded porticos of Pompey's theatre, past the garden fountains and the marble statues, past the place where Antony was standing 20 minutes ago and is now gone, out into the streets of the Campus Martius. They raise their weapons into the morning air. They call out to the people of Rome. Rome was free again, they said. The tyrant was dead. Libertas, liberty. The streets were silent. Citizens who were outdoors on the festival morning when the commotion from the theatre reached them closed their doors. Shopkeepers pulled their shutters. The Forum, usually busy at this hour, with petitioners and advocates and money changers jingling their coins, emptied within minutes. The baths near the Campus Martius sent their patrons home without explanation. No cheering crowds materializing from the side streets. No veterans of Caesar's legions gathering to celebrate the end of their general's domination. No senators emerging from the theatre to confirm what the conspirators had done. Nothing. Silence. The most powerful man in the world has been killed in a room less than 2 miles from the center of the city, and Rome has responded the way a city responds when it doesn't yet know which way to run. This is not what the conspirators expected. They expected applause. They expected the Senate to rise and declare the Republic restored. They expected the practical support of the equestrian class, who had watched Caesar's economic reforms with mixed feelings. They expected the people of Rome to understand that the dictator had been removed to protect them from tyranny, and to respond with the kind of civic joy that the Republic's founding myths had always promised. Instead, Brutus and Cassius and the others gather their colleagues and walk to the Capitoline Hill, the sacred mount that rises above the Forum, topped with the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the holiest site in Rome, and they barricade themselves there with the gladiators Decimus provided, armed men behind gates. They give speeches from the hilltop. The words carry down to the people gathered below. The people listen, then the people go home. In the Domus Publica, on the Via Sacra, Calpurnia receives the news before Caesar's body comes back to her. She heard the shouting from somewhere beyond the city walls, the kind of diffuse urban noise that travels in waves through a city when something has gone wrong. She sent messengers to the theatre complex. One came back, then another, and then, toward the end of the afternoon, the sources are consistent on this detail. Caesar's body lay unattended at the base of Pompey's statue for roughly 3 hours, because in those first confused hours after the assassination, no one wanted to be seen claiming it. No one knew who had power and who didn't, and the slaves who eventually came for him came as private persons, not as representatives of any authority. 3 of Caesar's household slaves carried him home on a litter with one arm hanging over the side, unsupported. This is the image that stays, not the assassination with its 23 wounds and its chaos and its famous last words that may never have been spoken. Not the body at the feet of Pompey's statue. The image that stays is 3 slaves and a litter and one arm hanging down. In this condition, the sources tell us, it is in Livy, in Plutarch's telling of the aftermath, Calpurnia received the body of the man who had been the master of the world. We are not told what she said. We are not told what her face looked like. She disappears from the historical record almost immediately, which is its own kind of statement about how history kept its accounts in this era. She received him. That is what we know. During the same afternoon, across the Tiber, at Caesar's garden villa on the Janiculum Hill, a different reckoning is underway. Cleopatra is 31 years old, and she has been in Rome for over a year and a half. She came here for political reasons as much as personal ones, to secure Caesar's acknowledgement of their son, to ensure that the child who would be known as Caesarion, Caesar's son, by her account, with the legal status of a Ptolemaic heir, would have some standing in the Roman political world that was increasingly determining the fate of Egypt. She came here because Caesar was here, and Caesar was the pivot point of the world. She is still here when the news comes across the river. A messenger, probably, or the sound of the city itself changing in a way that any political ear can read. Caesar is dead. Octavian, 18 years old and studying in Greece, is named primary heir. The will that Calpurnia has given to Antony contains no mention of Caesarion. The political calculation Cleopatra made when she traveled to Rome, the bet that Caesar would live, that she could secure recognition for her son, that the alliance would hold, has collapsed. She has lost the patron who was also, by all accounts, something more than a patron. And she is a foreign queen in a city that is, as of this morning, ungoverned in any meaningful sense. She waits. For a few more weeks she waits, hoping that something in the political chaos that follows will create an opening. It does not. The will stands. Octavian is the heir. Caesar's papers and money have gone to Antony. The men who might have supported her claim have either fled the city or are maneuvering to survive. By mid-April, Cleopatra and Caesarion board a ship for Alexandria. She will return to Rome's attention in a few years at Antony's invitation on a golden ship with purple sails. The story continues, but that is another episode. Lepidus, who had dinner with Caesar the night before and is now the most senior military man in Rome, occupies the Campus Martius with his legion by the evening of the 15th. He seals the approaches to the Forum. He takes a position between the Capitoline Hill, where the conspirators have barricaded themselves, and the rest of the city. He is not trying to avenge Caesar, he is trying to prevent the kind of mob violence that burned the old Senate House 12 years ago during the riots that followed Clodius's funeral. He is trying to keep the city from eating itself. He does not entirely succeed, but he succeeds enough. Antony, meanwhile, has spent the afternoon learning the shape of what has happened. He is inside his own heavily fortified house by nightfall, and he is reading Caesar's papers. Caesar's papers and Caesar's war chest, the money set aside for the Parthian campaign, 600 million sesterces by some accounts, enough to fund a war or buy a revolution. Calpurnia has given him both. She is in no position to refuse, and perhaps in those first dark hours, there is also some logic in it. Antony is the most powerful Caesarion left standing, and her husband's legacy is safer in his hands than available to anyone else. Antony is reading. He is planning. The conspirators on the Capitoline are planning too. They still believe at the end of this day that they can save the republic they killed for. They still believe that the Senate will confirm what they did. They are talking to Cicero, who was not part of the conspiracy, but who has been summoned to the Hill and is offering advice that Brutus characteristically will not fully follow. Cicero says, convene the Senate immediately, use your authority as praetor to call a session, and have Caesar formally declared a tyrant, which would retroactively justify the act. Make it legal before it becomes merely fatal. Brutus hesitates. He keeps looking for the moral clarity that his philosophy promised him and that the day has consistently refused to deliver. Somewhere in the city, in the houses of senators and equestrians and ordinary Romans, people are talking. They are figuring out what they think. Most of them thought Caesar had too much power. Most of them also thought Caesar kept the city fed, kept the peace between factions that had been at each other's throats for a generation, kept the roads safe and the grain flowing and the army paid. Most of them did not think they were voting for anything when Caesar became dictator. They just watched it happen. Now they are being asked to celebrate his death. The verdict on Caesar's funeral 5 days from now, when Mark Antony reads the will aloud and holds up the blood-soaked toga, and the crowd takes the torches from the pyre and goes looking for the men who killed him, that verdict will tell us what most of Rome actually thought about what happened on the 15th of March. The night falls on Rome. The Capitoline conspirators are still up there, still waiting. Caesar's body is in the Domus Publica, laid out. The city is quieter than it was. The way a city goes quiet after something too large to process has happened. The way a body goes quiet in the first moments of shock. Antony's house is fortified. Lepidus's legions are in the streets. The gladiators who were stationed at the theatre of Pompeii have been stood down. They are no longer needed. The deed is done. The deed is irreversible. In the theatre complex itself, the meeting room is dark. Caesar's blood is still on the floor and on the base of the pedestal, and dried now on the marble tiles in the pattern it made when it ran off the pedestal and spread across the stone. Nobody has gone back in. The statue of Pompey stands over it. Tomorrow people will begin the work of figuring out what Rome is now. But tonight, the room is silent and dark and empty. Calpurnia survived the civil wars. She fades almost entirely from the historical record after the 15th of March, one of the most present people in the story of the day, and then suddenly gone from it. We know she gave Caesar's papers to Antony. We know the house passed to Lepidus. After that, almost nothing. What became of her in the years of chaos that followed, the proscriptions, the battles, the rise of Octavian, is not recorded with any specificity. She is not mentioned in Cicero's extensive correspondence from this period. She does not appear in the accounts of the subsequent civil wars. She is simply gone from the record, which feels like its own kind of testimony. She was the one person in the story who was right about everything, and history repaid her by forgetting her. Marcus Junius Brutus lasted 2 years. He fled Rome in April, raised an army in the east alongside Cassius, and met Antony and Octavian at Philippi in Greece in October 42 BC. Before the second battle, the night before he knew would likely be his last, Plutarch records that he spent it quoting Greek literature to the friends who had not yet deserted him. He told them he blamed fortune, not virtue, that the principles were sound, that the failure was circumstantial, that a good man could die having done a good thing even if the good thing did not succeed. Then he ran on his own sword, held steady by a man named Strato who had served him for years. Antony ordered the body wrapped in his finest purple cloak and gave instructions for a proper cremation, the ashes to be sent to his mother Servilia. Octavian had other plans for the head. A storm in the Adriatic made the decision for him. Gaius Cassius Longinus, who was the engine of everything, who had recruited 60 men and organized the logistics down to the positioning of the gladiators, Cassius died the same day as Brutus, at the same battlefield by the same method. He gave his sword to a freedman named Pindarus, with orders to use it. He died believing that Brutus's wing of the army had collapsed, that the battle was lost, that there was no path forward. He did not know in that last moment that Brutus was still fighting. He made his final decision on incomplete intelligence, which was also in a sense how the conspiracy had been managed throughout. Decimus Junius Brutus Albinus died first of all of them in September of 43 BC, only 18 months after the Ides of March. He is the forgotten man of the story. History gave him a footnote, Shakespeare gave him the wrong name, and most retellings of the assassination give him barely a paragraph. But without Decimus, Caesar almost certainly does not go to the Senate on the 15th of March. Without Decimus's conversation in the atrium of the Domus Publica, without his specific knowledge of Caesar's pressure points and his willingness to exploit them, the whole plan collapses. What happened to him is worth knowing. After the assassination, he went to govern Cisalpine Gaul, the province that Caesar had assigned to him, one of the last acts of trust before the act of betrayal. He refused to hand it over when Antony came to claim it, which was the moment that converted political maneuvering into open war. Antony besieged him at Mutina in 44 BC. Octavian, in one of the more ironic moments in a period full of ironic moments, came to relieve the siege, that is, to rescue one of the men who had killed his adopted father, because Octavian needed the Senate's support more than he needed to express his personal feelings about Caesar's murderers. When Octavian arrived at the river outside Mutina, he made his position clear. He had come to oppose Antony, not to help Caesar's killers. Decimus thanked him from the other side of the water. After Mutina, Decimus's army began to dissolve. His legions deserted to Octavian. His remaining men melted away as he tried to march over the Alps to join Marcus Brutus in Macedonia. He was finally betrayed by a Gallic chieftain named Camillus, who handed him over to Antony's men on a road in Gaul. He was killed there, alone, far from Rome. Antony sent his head south by courier. There was no purple cloak, no elaborate cremation, no ceremony. He became, quickly, the most forgotten of the people who killed Caesar, his name misspelled by Shakespeare, his role undersold by Plutarch, his death unmarked by the kind of literary tribute that Antony gave to Brutus and that Brutus's own friends gave to Cassius. The Curia of Pompey, the room where it happened, was first burned by the angry crowd that gathered at Caesar's funeral 5 days later, then walled up by Augustus. He removed the statue of Pompey first, relocating it to a different part of the theatre complex. He sealed the entrance. He had the room filled in. According to Cassius Dio and Suetonius, it was eventually converted into a public latrine, which Cassius Dio records with what seems like deliberate dryness. The place where the Roman Republic ended was used, for the subsequent centuries, for exactly that purpose. In the summer of 2023, the sacred area of Lago di Torre Argentina in Rome, which includes the excavated foundations of the Curia of Pompeii, was opened to the public for the first time. You can walk there now. The ruins are roped off behind walkways. There are explanatory signs. There is a colony of cats that has lived in the site for decades and that the city's cat sanctuary maintains. The cats sleep in the sun on the ancient stones with the calm of animals that have never been asked to care about history. The back wall of the Curia is still there, curved as it always was, the extra shape that archaeologists identified in the excavations of the 1920s and 30s. The place where the statue of Pompey stood is marked. The foundation stones are stained in ways that are now impossible to interpret. On the evening of the 14th of March, the night before he died, Caesar sat at a dinner table with two men he trusted and talked about the best kind of death. A sudden and unexpected one, he said. They agreed, or they made polite sounds of agreement, or the conversation moved on. The wine came around again. The lamps were burning low. The slaves cleared the last of the dessert course and waited near the walls to be told they were no longer needed. What did Caesar think in the litter on the way to the theatre of Pompeii the next morning? After the failed sacrifices, after Calpurnia's tears, after Decimus's careful words in the atrium, after Spurina's last quiet exchange at the entrance, did he know? Did some part of him understand, stepping through the door into the curved meeting room with its tiered benches and its Pompey statue, that this was the end of something? He was 55 years old. He had crossed the Rubicon. He had won every battle he was ever in. He had bent the world to his will for decades. He knew that there were men who wanted him dead. He had known for years, and yet he went. Maybe the reason is not complicated. Maybe the man who said that a sudden and unexpected death was the best kind, and who said it the night before he got one, meant it. Maybe the version of Caesar who disbanded his bodyguard and refused to be governed by fear was also the version who walked through that door, knowing or half knowing what was on the other side. Not fatalism, not hubris, something closer to the kind of consistency that runs through a man's life and cannot be separated from the specific choices he made, even the last one. He pulled his toga over his face. He let go. The pedestal was drenched with blood. This has been Aphelion. Goodbye.